On the first day of Fondmas, my podcatcher gave to me a fond pod in a pear tree. I don't know. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Latvia's favorite podcast host, Joe. And joining me on this very special episode, I have Brett and Justin.
Heyo.
We're going to start as we usually do by briefly talking about some things we've been enjoying or otherwise up to recently. Who wants to go first on that?
I feel like I've kind of gone first the past couple of times, so I'm willing to
Brett,
pass that
go.
off.
Brett,
Yeah.
go.
Fair enough. Well, this week on the Adventures of Spider Gary, the bold jumping spider.
Oh, no, I don't
Uh,
want to hear anything about this. I'm like the world's most arachnophobic person.
I will speak as if it's not actually a spider, however.
Okay.
So Gary spent the last 6 days in a molting phase. After which, yesterday he emerged for the first time we've seen him in 6 days, and seems to be perfectly fine. We managed to we didn't have any. We tried to give him a live cricket like before he went into his molt, and he seemed completely terrified of it. He was like, "Nope, I'm gonna stay as far away from that thing as possible." But today we gave him a mealworm, and he decided to eat that within about 30 minutes. So he is now fat and happy and climbing around his cage. And so the adventures of Spider Gary continue for at least another week. In other things we've been doing, we started watching last night on Amazon a new show called Beast Games, which is hosted and created. I assume he did everything himself. Mr. Beast created this show. It's a game
Because
show.
he needs more money.
It's a it's like a game show, a bit like Squid Games in some ways, but also has like some features of like other big money game show kind of things.
Mr. Beast is killing people.
Well, I mean, there is a section where he drops him into a pit, and we don't know how tall that pit is, so it is unconfirmed whether they survived that or not. But in the first episode alone, he gave away over $2 million to people who were not continuing in the game.
Mr. Beast, if you're listening, I was kidding about you. I mean, clearly you do need more money. If you want to give me some of that money, that would be cool. You seem like an awesome dude.
Yes, include me in that as well. Apparently, along the way on this journey, he's giving away a Lamborghini, a private island, and a grand prize of $5 million is the grand prize.
How was the private island
Yeah, I was
not the
gonna
grand
say
prize?
the private island
I don't
is
know.
not worth $5 million. That seems weird.
Maybe
It's just a
maybe
rock.
it's very small. Yeah, I don't know. But so far it's been pretty entertaining and like a lot of really intense reactions from contestants. So, as you might imagine, with $5 million. But
Yeah.
it looks pretty interesting. We're gonna keep watching that. There's only 2 episodes available at the moment, so
Nice.
yeah.
Okay.
Justin,
On my side of things, finishing up like last minute Christmas stuff. I think I finally got all the presents wrapped, but I had purchased a few things like months ago. I don't remember if there's anything that's like left squirreled away in my closet or somewhere that I've missed. So it's been a busy time, a week, I guess you should say, from the last time we spoke. But I did find time to watch a few things, including probably the most noteworthy is a movie called Incantation, which I believe is on Netflix, if memory serves. Yes. The best way, it's a Taiwanese movie, I believe. And the best way I can describe it is imagine The Ring, but instead of the malevolent force being the ghost of a little girl who fell down a well or was shoved down a well or whatever, imagine that force is a god. And it gets really intense. It gets really gory. And it actually manages to be downright creepy and unsettling at times, simply because I'm not terribly well versed in like East Asian curses and that sort of thing. But what little I know of them, the more you know, the less you understand about them. It's like you try to do everything the curse giver wants, and it's never enough. And this really leans into that. It is a
Is the
found
curse
footage.
giver my wife? Hey, oh.
I mean, watch it and find out. But no, it's a legitimately good horror movie. It is subtitled, so as long as you don't mind reading your way through stuff, highly recommend it. It's I think it came out in 2012, or no, not 2012, 2022. If it had come out this year, it might have been in the running for like my favorite films of the year.
Wow.
So yeah, really atmospheric and well done.
Awesome. Anything else going on?
Uh, been running a few games. Ran the second module I've ever done for Mothership, which is a sci-fi horror game, just yesterday. And I'm really digging that system. It's kind of like when we did Eclipse Phase on here. It's kind of like that, except simpler rules, and more of a lean into the horror aspect than like the conspiracy aspect. But yeah, that module involved a an asteroid that looked to be sedimentary, which is not something an asteroid should be. And the crew, extracted, the core samples from it and found like a core, which was this impenetrable substance but perfectly spherical. And so during the course of their voyages, they were doing experiments on it. Something went wrong, and it woke up basically. And when it woke up, any dead or organic animal material gets basically like sucked towards it at about 20 Gs and forms like a ever growing layer of eventually fossilized gore around this sphere. And it's a matter of things are tearing through bulkheads. People's lunch is getting like whipped off their tables and ending up getting torn through the ship. And it's like just this mad dash of ever escalating odds and stakes as the ship is falling apart, and they're trying to figure out a way to actually either get away or get this thing off the ship without getting close enough that it tears you apart. Really unique scenario, and Mothership is full of modules like this. It's a fantastic RPG system. Um, so that's been the other exciting thing
Wow,
lately.
that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
It was. Uh,
Cool.
but yeah, what about you, Joe?
I haven't really been up to much new. I mean, as you kind of touched on, Justin, trying to get ready for the holidays in the coming week here. So, I did want to mention quickly a couple things that Alexis and I have been continuing to watch, which I think I know I've mentioned at least one of these shows before. I probably mentioned them both before, but both have new seasons. In the case of one of them, it's the final season, and I believe the finale just aired, but we're not quite there yet. And that is What We Do in the Shadows, which is a comedy centering around a group of vampires living in New York. And they were originally sent here to try to take over the United States and colonize it under vampire rule, but they kind of don't leave their house much and seem to be happy just kind of being dipshits together and having all sorts of wacky adventures. But this has really been one of my favorite comedies over the past few years. I think this is the sixth season now, and it's going to be the final one. So curious to see how it wraps up. But if you haven't checked it out, it's on Hulu. Um, I think it's originally on FX and then is available on Hulu for streaming, but highly recommended to pretty much anyone who's listening to this, all two of you. Um, the other show I wanted to mention is on, I feel like the streaming platform that nobody has, which is Apple TV Plus. And there are a surprising number of really good shows on that platform. The one we've been catching up with recently is Shrinking, which is kind of a dramedy starring Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. Yes, the Harrison Ford.
Well,
Um, and they both play psychologists, and it's kind of the premise without, I mean, it's mildly spoilery, but it's like established in the first episode. Jason Segel's character has lost his wife and is kind of left alone with like a teenage daughter. Um, his wife was killed by a drunk driver, and he kind of spirals after that and like gets into booze and drugs and women of the night, and then is kind of trying to clean his act up. But like one thing that this change in his life has sort of enabled him to do is start telling his clients like what he honestly thinks about them and what he thinks they should do to try to solve their problems, which usually is kind of a no-no in therapy. You know, the whole point is you kind of are supposed to talk things out yourself and reach your own conclusions, but he kind of says fuck it and starts, you know, telling people what he thinks they should do, and it's the wackiness ensues. It is funny, but it's also a really touching show, like it, and I think it balances the two really well. Again, it's got Harrison Ford, and he actually seems like he's trying, so that's always a plus. But anyway, that's Shrinking on Apple TV Plus, and I also recommend that because it's a great show. But enough about what we have been up to, my Balatrones. The main topic of tonight's episode is a game that has been sweeping the world, it seems like, especially in the past few months. It is a game called Balatro, which is, according to Wikipedia, a poker-themed roguelike deck building game. This game was originally released in February of this year on PC and consoles, and then in September was ported to mobile, Android, and iOS. I'm kind of curious before we really get into anything, what platforms did you gents play this game on?
I played it on PC. I picked it up on Steam, and just because it was the most straightforward way to access it for me, and I didn't want to necessarily have it on my phone.
Oh, so you're smarter than me, is what you're saying. What about you, Brett?
I played it on my phone. It felt like the easiest because it was the kind of thing where I looked at it and was like, okay, this is the perfect thing to just sitting on the couch in the evening and just kill some time with it.
Yeah.
And I don't have to like run away from my family to do it. I can just, be in the same
just
room
mentally.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
The siren song.
You can at least be there
Balatro.
physically. Yeah. Well, we might. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is like I was a little bit surprised that it started on PC and console because it feels like it would have like started on mobile and worked its way other places.
Yeah, I could see that. I also played it on my phone, and it feels, I mean, it does work really well, you know, in that format. I know I've mentioned on this podcast before, I first started playing this game as a result of a crossover with the game Dave the Diver, in which they introduced a very limited version of Balatro. There were definitely only kind of a handful of poker cards you could get, and you're kind of limited into how much time you can spend playing it in Dave the Diver, which is probably a good thing. But once I realized, I mean, I kind of got hooked on it in there and then realized that it was its own game and that it was available for the phone. And that seemed like both the best and worst idea, which we'll get into more reasons for that maybe in a little bit here. A little more about the game. It was actually developed by a single person using the pseudonym Local Thunk. Originally, it was apparently going to just be a game that he was going to share with his friends and didn't really have any grand designs for. But it started getting some positive feedback amongst his friend group. So that led him to releasing an early version on Steam, which apparently led to some streamers picking it up, and it kind of got a lot of attention that way, and eventually got picked up by a publisher. Apparently, within 8 hours of its final release, it had made over $1 million in revenue, according to its publisher, PlayStack. And over the first 6 months of its release, it sold over 2 million copies.
Oh.
And so that's pretty impressive. I mean, I don't remember exactly how much I paid. I want to say it was around $10 maybe.
Yeah, I believe mine was like 10.
Sounds about right.
I mean, not an expensive game, but not, you know, dirt cheap. So somebody has made, many millions of dollars off this, which is kind of interesting. Apparently the name comes from Balatrones, as I called you gentlemen, which were professional jesters in ancient Rome. Um,
I thought it was going to
and
translate to something like bastards or something.
um, in addition to its financial and critical success, it also won 3 awards at the Game Awards this year, which I know people have kind of mixed feelings on what that might mean in terms of an accolade, but it was also nominated for Game of the Year, which is kind of impressive considering what a small game it is and the fact that it was made by a single person and it was up against some pretty major, AAA titles.
Hmm.
Um, so let's get into the game itself. As I mentioned, it's a poker-themed roguelike deck building game. I have to admit, none of those 3 components are things that I historically have really had a lot of interest in. So it's makes it even odder that this game has kind of taken hold on me. Um, I guess I also want to ask you guys, like, what drew you to checking this game out?
um,
Um,
you can go ahead,
like
Kit.
I'd heard the name floating around a bit, and then I don't remember what was first. If I think maybe you mentioned it first, Joe, and then I one of the Twitch streamers that I watch, one of the primary ones I watch, he played it once on stream as like actually a like a promotional thing. Uh and it was shortly after that where once I had seen the gameplay a bit, then I probably downloaded that to give it a try.
Yeah.
Um, I like roguelikes. I like deck builders. I mean, like I have probably 300 hours in Slay the Spire, just because that was one of my first introductions to that combination of genres, and it really hooked me. Um, but the thing is, that game and most of the other ones that I play in this genre have some semblance of story and character and that sort of thing. And I initially didn't think I was ever going to pick this one up. Mainly because there is no story, and it's just you look at it and you hear the premise, and it's just well, it's poker cards, and there's
Yeah.
some like different jokers, and that didn't really seem like something I'd enjoy. But then I kept seeing on Steam overwhelmingly positive reviews, and then it kept popping up like on my Facebook feed with other reviews of it. Then you mentioned it, and it's just like well fine, fine. I've got $10 I can spare. I'll bite the bullet. I'll see what it's like. And if it hadn't been for all of that positive word of mouth, I probably never would have actually given this a shot. Just because it didn't sound like something that would
Yeah.
really appeal.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing about this game. Like I said, I mean, I've played maybe 1 or 2 roguelikes that I really felt like got their hooks into me and I really enjoyed. I've never really played any deck building games, and like poker is also just not a thing I've ever been super into. Well, I mean, let's talk a little bit, I guess, about how the game actually plays. So it is kind of a weird combination of kind of mechanics where the core gameplay is basically it's like a single player version of poker where you're not really playing against an opponent, but each round there is a different score you're trying to reach. And you do that basically by forming poker hands, pairs, flushes, straights, etc. So I mean, it uses, at least at its core, a standard 52 card deck, and then you can kind of build on that. And the core actual gameplay is based on real life poker hands, but then it adds a number of different components on top of it. I mean, the roguelike factor is that you're basically, to quote unquote win the game, there's a series of 8 what they call blinds you have to beat, which I think each blind is 4 rounds, if I'm remembering
Three.
correctly. Oh,
Three.
three.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so each is 3 rounds. Um, And basically, you win the game by progressively building a stronger deck and, beating the series of matches. But then they add things on. The biggest, I think, addition to standard poker would be the way that the Joker cards function. Throughout the game, you can kind of acquire a series of these specialty Joker cards, which each do a different thing. And it could be a lot of them will add. Well, actually, okay, backing up. So it's your basic poker hands. Each hand type inherently has like a base number of chips and a base multiplier attached to it. And then when you score a hand, it basically just adds the value of the cards to that base. But the scoring is comprised of these chips, which you could think of as dollars or whatever, and multipliers. And so then you get these Joker cards, which mostly either add like to the either can like add to or multiply your multiplier factor or give you more chips, things like that. Basically, ways to enhance the score. Um, and so as you go on, you can kind of unlock additional decks. You can unlock additional Jokers. In addition to those, there are all kinds of ways that you can enhance individual cards. So it becomes this deck building system as well, where you can kind of cater. There are ways that you can destroy cards or convert cards into other cards. So over time, you can kind of try to cater the deck to your own playing style and what you're trying to achieve. So there are multiple layers to what is ostensibly a fairly simple game.
And you can skip blinds too, to get like certain bonuses and whatnot. Um, and when I first saw that mechanic, I'm like, well, why would I ever play, a blind and risk losing? Why wouldn't I
Yeah.
just like skip it, get bonuses, and go? But there are certain like you get actual like besides the chips, you get dollars that you can use to spend to at a shop in between
Yeah.
rounds to do that, and you don't get those dollars unless you actually play the blind. So it's like kind of a trade-off risk reward kind of thing, which is a surprising level of depth sometimes, depending on what build you're going for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then in the shop, you can buy, I think there's like, well, there's four. There's Jokers, but then there's like three other types of cards. There's arcane cards, spectral cards, and planet cards. And those each have different effects on things. Like the planet cards will all enhance the base stats of a given hand type. So, like, it'll increase just the base number of points you get for playing a flush or a straight or a pair or whatever. The arcane cards have a variety of effects, but mostly seem to center around adding special effects to your actual cards in your hand. So, like, they'll make it so if you play a certain card or even just have a certain card in your hand, it will like give you extra money or add to the multiplier, things like that. And then the
Or it might turn the
spectral,
card. I'm
what
sorry,
was that?
or it can actually like do things that also add a layer of risk too. Like I think there's one that can turn a card into glass, where it gives you
Oh
more
yeah.
points and whatnot. But if you use it, then it can break, and
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff at play with the
Yeah.
tarot stuff.
Yeah, there are many
Mm-hmm.
factors. Then there's the spectral cards, which those do like all kinds of stuff, but I feel like those in general tend to have the most risk involved.
Yeah, for me, they seem to be like the highest risk, highest reward. Like
Yeah.
there's very definite ones in that grouping that I stay away from. Except like I can't risk that.
Yeah, because it'll be like, destroy one random card in your hand or destroys two random cards in your hand.
Or
And usually
duplicate a
it'll then,
Joker,
what's
and
that?
or like duplicate a Joker, but like all the other Jokers
Oh, yeah, it
get
destroys all
destroyed.
other Jokers. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, and most of those are at random. Like, even the ones where it only destroys like one or two cards, like, you can't choose which cards it's going to destroy. So, there's definitely a lot of risk there. But anyway, so it's poker plus all these different things. And they're like, I want to kind of talk to you guys about. I'm assuming we all have kind of developed our own go-to strategies, and I feel like there are so many different ways that you can play this game. Um, so I guess that's the question for now. Like, what has kind of become your approach to the game?
Well, for me, part of it hinges on one other element I don't think we mentioned is that as you play, you unlock different decks that give
Oh yeah.
you like different abilities, or they're
Yeah.
like comprised of different cards. Um, so the one I've kind of gravitated towards most recently, anyway, is there's a deck. I think it's the ancient deck or the antique deck or something like that, where it doesn't have any face cards in it.
Hmm.
But that inherently makes it easier to get straights because there's fewer card combinations you can get, and it's more condensed and whatnot. So I like that one. Combined with there's a Joker that means you can. It makes it so you can make straights and flushes with only four cards instead of three.
Yeah.
And there's another Joker where if you it basically if you play a card that has exactly four hands in it, it increases the value of that Joker in terms of what it adds to your overall score every time you do that. So I've that is like one of the favorite builds I've kind of stumbled across because you can just sort of keep playing high scoring forehand cards and keep having it incrementally just make them better and better as it goes just from playing them.
Yeah, that one actually is um, currently my highest scoring deck build.
Wow.
Um,
Oh, I thought I was
and
being
so
clever.
that's one that I've just stumbled on and found a lot of success with it. Well, but uh, I think the one that I played the most at this point, the one that's gotten me through the highest difficulty level, which we haven't mentioned that either, but you can, as you progress, you can increase the difficulty of the game by selecting a different level, and it like gives you certain penalties that you have to bear through. Um, but the deck that has gotten me the farthest through the difficulty so far is the one that makes all suits either hearts or clubs. I don't know, it's
Hmm.
spades. I think it's spades.
Yeah.
Hearts and spades are the only suits you have in your deck. You still have 52 cards, but they're all hearts and spades. And then I go for flushes. And I find that to be a pretty solid, straightforward build because I know right off the get go like what I'm trying to do. Whereas if I'm playing a different deck, what my strategy ends up being is just whatever jokers come up, I like, okay, well, I guess that's how I'm playing now because like the first couple jokers I get kind of dictate where I'm gonna go with the
Yeah.
build.
It's interesting because I have yet a completely different approach. Like it seems like you guys are both kind of taking different approaches. I tend to go very hard on full houses and face cards.
Okay.
So there are a couple of my favorite jokers. There's one that makes it so that every scored face card adds five to the multi. And then there's another one I mean the furthest I've gotten was like that one. There's another one that re-triggers every face card. So then you're getting like plus 10 multi for each face card. There's another one you can get that will re-trigger the first play card twice. So just
Oh, yeah.
like basically building this combination of like a couple jokers that just like re-trigger and add multis to the face cards. And then I try to get a couple that have like add X to the multi. So like there are a few different jokers where like it'll add like 0.25 times the multi for every planet card you play or every, tarot card or whatever. So I usually try to have one or two of those on the end to like bulk things up and really just like add and multiply the multis.
There is
Um,
there
yes.
is one other combination that I only stumbled across once, but it got me pretty far. And that's the one that involves the actual like dollars you earn after every hand or every blind, and that's another reason why you might want to play versus skip.
Yeah.
Um, there's it involved three specific jokers. One that it adds the sell value of all the other jokers that you have to itself as like as part of the multiplier, and then adds
Yeah.
that multiplier every time. There's one that's simply called the egg, which every blind you play, it adds three to its own to its own value. And there's one that it adds the total amount of dollars that you have to I think the number of chips that you have. It's like dollars times five or something like that, and it adds it to the chip value. So you just keep accruing dollar amounts, and you keep accruing amounts that your the jokers in your hand that in your top bar are worth, and it keeps just building and building and building upon itself, so that no matter what you play, you're getting like times 100 and plus 250
Yeah.
chips or whatever. And
Mhm.
so there's a ton of different ways you can approach
Nice.
this.
Yeah. I guess that raises another question, which is, do either of you have even a rough sense of what the furthest round you've made it to was?
I do because I looked at it earlier. I think my highest round is like 32 or something like that.
I want to say I made it into the 20s, but I'm not sure of the exact number.
I once made it to round 37 in a row. And
Holy crap.
I mean, it gets insane. Like I was kind of, messaging you guys when I had this one build going where I was like regularly getting, like hundreds of millions of,
Chips.
chips per hand. And I was like, oh man, I'm a god. I'm invulnerable. Like I'm invincible. And then I got to round 37. I think it was an extra large blind. And it was like, I had to get like 400 billion chips or something. Like it like really escalated quickly from like
Yeah.
the round before to that one to where it was like, there was no way I was ever going to do that. But then like, I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at like Balatro Reddit, and there's like a whole community around this game. But I mean, I've seen screenshots where people have like, 1 times 10 to like exponential numbers of chips. Like it's
Wow.
so many that it can't even display it with like,
Wow.
the zero. And like, I have no idea how you get to that. But well, I have some idea. Like, have you guys seen legendary jokers often?
I've had a
I
few cycle through.
I've only seen two so far, and neither of them are seem that legendary to me.
I've
Yeah.
also only seen two, but one of them is like one of the reasons I got as far as I did. Because there's one, because I am like a face card crazy person, there's a legendary joker that adds times 2.5 multi every time a face card is triggered.
Oh my.
And
Okay.
like the times multis are like probably the most powerful thing you can have because it multiplies your multi score. So when I'm playing like all kings and queens, they're all getting re-triggered multiple times. Every time they're triggered, it's times 2.5 multi. Like that's how I got as far as I did that one time. But
Okay.
like even with that, I still like I don't know how people get to where it's just like exponential numbers. Like that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really curious. I really wanted to know like what your build was to get to that number because my highest so far was is 33 million in one hand, and that was with that straights deck that I was talking about
Yeah.
before. But yeah, I have not gone. Have you guys gone looking for like any kind of like building like guides online? Because thus far I have not. I've been wanting to try and figure
I
it out
haven't,
myself.
yeah, I haven't either, honestly. Like I might just because I am genuinely curious how you get like that crazy high of a score. Like I really felt like the deck I had at that one point was I can't imagine one being better, but I don't know. I mean, I will say that I think there's like 150 different Joker cards you can get. And I feel like there are a lot that I've seen that I probably haven't really paid as much attention to as I should have because I'm usually like looking to play a specific way, but it's possible that there are other strategies that one could pursue that might not be as obvious that might pay off. I don't know.
Mm, right. It's probably fair to point out too. Like I played uh for quite a while before I realized that plus malt and X malt were different.
Mm. It took
Actually,
me,
it should
yeah,
not have taken that long, but literally it's just the plus malt literally adds to your multiplication to your and
yeah,
then the X malt multiplies the multiplication. So
yeah.
it's like much larger.
It took me a while to realize that too. One thing I actually just realized, I think 2 days ago, like after I had, my best runs and whatnot, is that you can rearrange the order of the cards at any time, and that is the way that they'll actually be scored.
Mm,
Like I knew you could kind of drag them around, but I didn't realize that, if you have a multi-card that is like only specific to like one type of card, you can, or like the card I mentioned that re-triggers the first scored card multiple times, you can actually like, even if, because by default, like it displays the cards in order of their value, like left to right, highest to lowest. But you can make it so that like even if the first card you want to score is a lower value than what would be the card all the way to the left inherently, you can rearrange it. And like, I mean, again, that's something I just realized like 2 days ago.
yeah, the rearranging, I looked at that and said, why would I need to do that? Until I realized the X mult
Yeah.
thing. And then I was like,
Yep.
oh, those need to be on the end.
Hmm.
Don't put those first.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just wasting them at that point.
Any other general things you guys wanted to talk about?
Um, I mean, I at some point I would like to address just why this works so well, and like why a game like this is succeeding as much as it is compared to, like you mentioned, there's a lot of AAA games that came out this year, and a
Yeah.
lot of them really kind of fell on their faces. So I mean, I think it would be worthwhile talking about why the appeal or what the appeal of Balatro is, why it succeeds, whereas these
Yeah.
multi-million dollar projects just don't.
Well, let's get into it. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Um, a few. So I think it's mainly a couple of different things. Um, like I said when we close to when we started out, this didn't seem like something that would appeal to me at all. It was such a strange concept, so abstract, it didn't seem like it would work. But when I sat down and tried it, it actually really opened things up. And that the more I thought about it, the more I realized that sort of harkens back to like the early days of gaming, like the 80s, even into the 90s a bit, when people were just throwing like weird out there concepts at a wall and seeing what stuck. I mean, Marble Madness, you're rolling a ball around a field. Why would that be fun? And yet it was. Or like Paperboy, you're delivering newspapers. Yeah, that sounds like the most boring thing in the world, and yet it was fun. Or just anything back, Kix or QIX, however the hell you pronounce that, where you're just like an abstract shape partitioning off parts of the screen so before other abstract shapes touch you. Somehow it worked. And this feels like it would have belonged back in that era of gaming too. And that sort of unbridled creativity, I think, is kind of timeless. Um, Whereas, if you ask me, a lot of the big budget things, they're too safe, they're too samey. It's just like, oh, Assassin's Creed 87 is out, and it is the same as the past 50 entries of it. Why should I care? Whereas this, it's weird, it's out there, and it's attention grabbing and fun at the same time. I think that's a big reason. Any thoughts on that from you two? Or
I agree just with the uniqueness bit of it that I mean, I really can't think of anything else quite like this. I mean, there's always been several other deck building type games where you are like unlocking and building your deck stronger and stronger, but it hasn't been playing cards deck building. It's been these fantasy themed character cards, and it probably, because of that fact alone, is bringing in a lot of people, people who enjoy poker, or watching on TV, or just playing it with amongst friends, or whatever they play it in local tournaments or something. And and like you say, it's something very easy, just sit around, and you got like 10-15 minutes to kill. You can play a round or two. And I think that probably lends a lot to its popularity right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, kind of following off the last thing you said, Brett, and tying it back to what Justin was talking about this maybe hearkening back to some earlier days of gaming, I think one thing that works with this game is that much like a lot of older video games, it is something that you can just pick up and play for a short time and put back down. Back in the day, like the olden arcade days and early days of home consoles, a lot of the time you were just trying to get a high score, and a given run through of any game would only usually last a few minutes. I mean, at the Halloween party this year, Cody had some classic games set up like Pac-Man and things like that, where it's like you could, I mean, I think I had the high score for Pac-Man and I probably played it for like 5 minutes. Like, it's kind of these little bite-sized things that you can do to kill some time and like not have to necessarily invest a lot in. And I mean, I think what maybe works for Balatro is that it is that, but also it rewards you for investing more time in it. You can pick it up in a given time, especially if you have it on your phone, as Brett and I were not unwisely chose to do. Um, if I'm at work and I'm on break and I have like 10 minutes to kill, I can pull my phone out and play some Balatro and put it away and like come back to it later, or like maybe I'll the run will end but like I will have learned something, so it's like able to be played in these bite-sized pieces.
And it's
But
very
it
pause friendly. Like you can literally
Yeah,
just stop in the middle of a hand, turn the phone off, and come
yep,
back later and just start right back up where you're at.
yeah. And weirdly, I mean, I kind of wanted to ask you guys about this, and this is maybe a way to get to that. It's weird because I feel like personally over the past decade or so I have had a hard time playing games that don't really have a compelling narrative and like don't make me feel emotionally invested in anything. And this game is the polar opposite of that. I mean, as Justin mentioned, it has no plot. Like there's nothing going on here besides like the pure gameplay. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you guys about was, I guess, how do you feel about that aspect of this game in general? And also more specifically, I'm assuming you have both at least like won the game at when you finish the eight ante rounds, and you literally just get a screen that says you win, and then it gives you the option to go into endless mode where you can just keep playing until you lose, but there's like no fanfare whatsoever when you quote unquote beat this game. How did you guys feel about that?
Um, I think there's a certain I don't want to sound pretentious, but there's like a certain purity to that. Like it is all about the experience, and being able to just play until you can't progress any further. That's I mean I like that. It's not just like, oh, credits roll and you have to start over, or New Game Plus or whatever, which there is kind of a New Game Plus feature to this, but yeah, the fact that you can just keep going, you can keep trying to tailor your deck and try out new things at higher and higher levels to see what works. It it respects your time. It lets you, play as much or as little as you want, like you were saying. Um, and yeah, I kind of like that. It's like, all right, you got an achievement. Here's a new difficulty level, but you can keep going here if you want. And actually, even the thing you were saying earlier about how this is kind of a more bite-sized experience, I hadn't considered that being as much of a positive as it is. Because recently I tried picking up an RPG I hadn't played in a while, and it's like, oh God, what are these stats? What does this resource do again? It's just I would have to pretty much start over to figure out what I was
Yeah.
doing.
Mm.
This I could leave this for a couple of months and come back to it and still know exactly how to play it. Um, but sorry, I got a little off topic there,
No, you're
but
good. I mean, so Brett, I'm going to kind of slightly rephrase the question and direct it at you. Don't wait for the translation. Um, I mean, Justin kind of said he likes the way that it just kind of ends. Like, it feels appropriate to its bite-sized nature. How did you feel about, I guess, the like structure and length of the game leading up to that way? Like, when you got the screen that says you win, did it feel satisfying to you? Like, did it feel like did you have a feeling that you would expect to have when you beat a game? Like, what did that feel like in that moment?
Honestly, I was disappointed. And I thought, I spent $10 on this? Wait, what? Because, and then I'll explain how that came about. So I played probably I probably lost like 2 or 3 rounds before I won. Um and it felt like, okay, I'm learning, I'm getting better at this. My strategies are coming together. And I had started unlocking a few of the other extra jokers and things like that. And then I beat the eighth ante, the was a basically the end of the end of the game.
Yeah.
Um and like I say, I felt, I was like disappointed. I was like, oh, it only took me like 4 tries. Like, wait a minute. And that was before I realized that once you beat that, then you got a new deck with a different ability to use to try and beat the game with that one. And then I started looking, I was like, oh, there's like all these other things. There's like challenges you can do, like specific challenges that are set up. And there's like so many other ways to try and beat the game. And um I realized then that there's way more game available than just that. And it has, like, I've continued obviously playing and enjoying it. But it does, from that point, there's quite a bit of like grinding, I would say, before past that point where you're really well, I mean, not necessarily, but if you're playing different decks, it's not like grinding. It's like a different experience. But there is a bit of like trying to unlock things. Like, sometimes I go into a round specifically trying to unlock something. Like I'll see like
Yeah.
on a Joker card that says, "Oh, you have to," like, I've got one now that I've been trying to do that says discard 5 jacks in one hand. And I'm like, all right, we're gonna go into this game trying to do this. I don't know how I'm gonna pull it off, but sometimes I do that. Like, it's just, I'm not trying to win, I'm just trying to unlock stuff. And
Yeah.
that's like the grindy bit of it. So if you're not willing to kind of do that to kind of further yourself along, I could see how for some people this would feel like a short, unfulfilling experience.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, the first time I beat it, I also was a little disappointed. And I mean, I think it took me longer to get there than it sounds like it took you, Mr. Fourth Try, um, but it feels like once you get a good build going, it is not a super long period of time before that screen pops up saying you win. And when I got there, I was caught off guard because I wasn't really keeping track of like what in round I was on, and like realizing that I was getting to the quote unquote end. And so when that hit me, I was like, oh, that's it. This is what I've been working toward. But it's interesting because ostensibly it doesn't seem like there would be a ton of replay value. But as you said, it seems like there are always more things to unlock. There are always different things you can try. Like I almost immediately started playing again and, have been obsessively replaying and replaying and replaying since, just trying to get further and further and better and better. So
Mm,
the game definitely works on you a little bit.
yeah, especially, I'm sure everybody's different in how they approach games and like what they enjoy, but um, for me, I do enjoy the like the experience of making things bigger and better. Like, I play a lot of survival type games, where you're like gathering resources to build a base, and
Yeah.
not everybody likes that though, but that there's a lot of that kind of feel to this in aspects.
When I had that one deck where I felt like a god, I mean, I feel like in those sorts of games, you get to that point where you're just like, I have all the things.
Mm.
And then I was not unstoppable. I was in fact stoppable. Um, any other thoughts? Anything else anyone wants to discuss about Balatro?
Um, I would say I really appreciate and respect the fact that this is a complete experience. Like, you buy it and you have the whole game. There's no There's no season passes. There's no like timed events. There's no like there's no FOMO. There's no like, oh no, if I don't, spring for this season's battle pass, I'm gonna miss this special deck or something like that. It is you buy the game, you have the game, and it's been a long time since I've been able to experience that. There might be DLC somewhere down the line, but right now it's like this is what gaming should be. You shouldn't have to.
They're gonna start releasing like new Joker packs or something.
They might,
They may
but
at some point.
they're not essential to like getting the full experience. I
Yeah.
feel like this what we have here is a very well-rounded package already.
One little just little feature that I found entertaining and enjoyable is the fact that you can change the card art of the face cards to a bunch of different other games. And I'm not sure if I mean, they've obviously got like they got the rights to use this licensing, but just a list I found here, I don't know if it's all of them or not, but
The Witcher, Dave the Diver. Those are
Slay
the
the
only two
Spire.
I can think of off the top of my head.
Vampire Survivors, Among Us, The Binding of Isaac, Cyberpunk 2077, Stardew Valley, and Slay the Spire are the other ones that I know of. And there may be more than that at this point. I don't know, but it's just a fun little kind of quirk to it that I do enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it really has become like a cultural phenomenon, at least amongst the gaming community. Um, as I've mentioned many, many times now, there's a crossover with Dave the Diver where they actually insert Balatro into that game. I could be wrong, but I think they are maybe doing that with some other games as well. And then there's this crossover where there's, art from other games coming into Balatro. So it's
Mm,
like it's weird because it is like the most independent of indie games made by one person, but it seems like it is like having a pretty big impact across the industry.
yeah, the fact that they've caught the attention of these other developers, these major developers, you're talking
Yeah.
CDPR, as both Witcher and Cyberpunk, and right off the top of my head, I'm not sure who does the other ones, but they're pretty substantial developers, and they are happy to like partner up with this like one person development team here. That's really kind of says something about
Yeah, move over, Zuckerberg. We got your metaverse right here.
The Balatroverse.
uh, uh,
All right. Well, if no one else really has anything you want to discuss, I am happy to make this as close to a Balatro bite-sized episode as we can here on the Fond Pod. So let's maybe share some final thoughts and give this thing a numerical ranking. Who wants to go first?
I guess I can take points since no one else is jumping at it. Um, I mentioned how this didn't seem like it was going to be my cup of tea, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And with regards to like the ending, whether it was a disappointment or not, kinda. But then I contrast it with like the first roguelike deck builder I ever really got into, Slay the Spire, where I spent probably a couple of years trying to actually get to the final ending of that game with just one character. And I didn't think the ending was all that satisfying when I finally got to it. So I think, in all honesty, having a shorter experience with an ending that lets you keep going, it can be better than a 100 200 hour like quest to finally get to an ending and then only to find out that ending is not entirely worth the price of admission. Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, you have completed a great game.
it.
But no, so this one, it was as much of a surprise for me as it was for I think a lot of people. I mean, especially like the Game Awards where it ended up taking home like I think best PC game. Um, I will it have the legs to to keep me invested years and years down the line? I'm not 100% sure yet. Uh, but it's a very solid experience. I'd say it's worth the price. And yeah, I could see myself just coming back to it in the short term at least. plenty of times. 8 out of 10.
Nice.
I found myself I didn't know, I had heard that it was, quite popular. And it I went in kind of with that mindset and was still kind of caught off guard a little bit by how much I kind of enjoyed and got caught up and um somewhat, I guess, addicted is probably the best word for it, because I kept coming back like quite often. And it is very, I kind of mentioned before, I think different gamers, with different, styles of how they like to play, definitely some people are going to like really like this, and other people are going to not really care for it. I mean, it's pretty similar to all games, but you know, to say that this is a great game just generally, um, maybe it is not, doesn't fit for everybody, but um, I mean, I really enjoy it. I still, I've been playing now for so I'm gonna say like 3 weeks or so, maybe 4 weeks, something like that. And still play it most days, at least for a small amount of time. Um, and I think I'm going to continue playing for at least quite a while here. Um, the $10 to buy in is a I still, even though I've been getting a lot of time, enjoyment out of it, it's worth the money that I spent. But also considering just like what it is, and like the fact, it's just a very kind of plain kind of graphical game. There isn't a lot going on here. Um, Normally I wouldn't think that you would be paying $10 for a game like that, but I am getting enough enjoyment out of it to make it worth that much to me. But um, and I think the last thing I would mention is just the fact that it was, it's been nominated Game of the Year, and I didn't we say like IGN actually gave it Game of the Year, I think. Is that true? Something
That
like that.
sounds right.
One
Yeah, it
of
was that. It might have been like PC Game of the Year. I think Game of the Year, like the like for everything was Astrobot, I want to say.
That was at the
oh,
Game
that's right.
Awards.
Metaphor
Okay,
Fantasia
okay.
was IGN Game of the Year. What? Stop! Hey, everybody, how you doing?
Wah,
Hey, Cody's
wah.
back.
Who is this guy?
Hey, it's
Um,
Blue. Hi, guys.
Uh,
so
And
I
that's our
would,
cue to exit. No,
I don't know that I would ever consider this for Game of the Year myself, just because of how it's very just a basic, like almost retro kind of graphic styling game. It's, it's certainly not like there hasn't been put as much effort into this as like these massive AAA games, but still, I would give this a pretty high rating for what it is. It's very enjoyable. Um, 8, yeah, 8 sounds about right. I would give it about an 8.
all right. I agree with most of what you guys have said, except the part where Brett seemed to want to shit on it because it's kind of a small slight game. Fuck you, Brett. I mean, what? No. No, I think that's a fair point. I mean, when you were talking about the price, I was kind of like, yeah, maybe this would feel better as like a $5 game, but it was developed by a single person. I'm sure he put a lot of work into it. And also, even though it does feel like this kind of basic, slight, small game, we have all spent a lot of time playing it, and it sounds like we're going to all spend a lot of time playing it in the future. Like, I think it does manage to pack a lot of replayability in there. It seems to have an addictive quality to like everyone who has played it, which is not an easy accomplishment. And Brad, I feel like you were saying that like maybe it wouldn't be a great game for everybody. And I mean, that's true, but I feel like the three of us, we have a lot of crossover, but we also have a lot of disparity in terms of the types of games that we're into and things we're into in general.
True.
I feel like we've all said that we're not necessarily into at least one of the three game genres that is tacked on this game, and yet we all seem to really enjoy this game. So I don't know if I can really knock it from a value prospect perspective because it seems like it's kind of doing everything right. All that said, I do have some concerns. I think my biggest one is I still feel a little unsatisfied with the way it ends, even though it doesn't really ever end. I almost feel like the way that I came to it through Dave the Diver lessens the experience of the game itself because in Dave the Diver, there is a side mission tied to it. So there's at least like some story element. Kind of hilariously, in retrospect, in Dave the Diver, you go to this village and everybody there is suddenly addicted to this new game, which turns out to be basically Balatro. And as I now know, that's just how Balatro works. But I feel like playing it through that and having some sort of quest line and story tied to it made it feel maybe a little bit more fulfilling on some level. And I do kind of miss that in the game itself. That being said, this game has taken over my life over the past month or two. It is super addictive. I would absolutely consider it for a game of the year. Um, I ended up giving it an 8.5. So we are averaging out to 8.166666666666667. With that, this has been another rousing episode of Balatro occasionally Balatroing. I'm Joe. That's been Brett. That's been Balatro and Justin. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We
Um,
will see you soon. What was that,
a,
Justin?
a merry Balatro to all, and to all a good Balatro.
And Balatro in a Balatro.